The morning sun cast three long shadows across the dusty surface of Moon Delta 417. Professor Reed adjusted his environment suit's temperature control as he led his small team toward the ruins they had spotted from orbit. Behind him, Tom carried their scanning equipment while Dr. Wells documented everything with her hover camera. "Another human failure," Reed said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement through the team's communication channel. "Just like the last 6 we found." He kicked a piece of metal, watching it tumble across the gray surface with less gravity than they were used to. The ruins didn't look like much from the outside, just another collection of crumbling structures that the humans had abandoned centuries ago when they mysteriously vanished from the galaxy. The Galactic Archaeological Society had spent decades studying these remnants, each site reinforcing their belief in humanity's technological inadequacy. "Look at these walls," Tom said, running his scanner across the structure's exterior. They actually used physical metals instead of energy fields. "Primitive stuff." He chuckled, the sound echoing in their helmet communications. Dr. Wells moved closer to one of the walls, her hover camera following close behind. "The construction matches other human sites we studied. Basic alloys. Nothing special. They never did figure out how to properly harness quantum materials." The team made their way around the perimeter of the facility. It was larger than they had expected, covering nearly a square kilometer of the moon's surface. Most of it had been buried under centuries of cosmic dust, but the outline was still visible to their trained eyes. "At least they knew how to build big," Reed said, marking points of interest on his wrist computer. "Though I suppose that's all they could do, build big and simple." The team reached what appeared to be a main entrance. The door was a massive thing of metal and composite materials, sealed tight despite the centuries of exposure to space. Ancient human writing marked the surface, barely visible under the dust. "Restricted access," Dr. Wells translated, consulting her database. They loved their warning signs. Found similar ones at the Mars facility ruins. Tom set up his main scanning equipment, its holographic interface springing to life in the vacuum. "Getting some odd readings, Professor. The density measurements don't match what we're seeing on the surface." "Probably just sensor interference from all this metal," Reed replied, waving dismissively. "Humans love to shield everything in layers of alloys. Never did trust in proper energy shielding." As they worked to set up their base camp, none of them noticed the tiny red light that had begun blinking near the door's control panel. They were too busy laughing at the primitive air filtration systems they found and the outdated power distribution nodes scattered around the facility. "You know what's funny?" Tom said as he finished setting up their analysis station. "Humans actually thought they could compete with us technologically. There are records of them claiming they had weapons that could destroy entire solar systems." He laughed, the sound bouncing through their comm channel. Dr. Wells joined in the laughter, and yet here we are, centuries later, picking through their abandoned failures. Some superweapon. Professor Reed smiled as he prepared to document their first day's findings. These human sites were always good for his research papers, perfect examples of how a species could achieve space travel without ever really understanding the technology they were using. As the team settled in for their first night on the moon's surface, their camp lights illuminating the ancient facility, a series of systems deep below the surface began a silent boot sequence. In darkness that hadn't been disturbed for centuries, ancient processors awakened and long-dormant programs began their initialization routines. Above ground, the archaeological team slept peacefully, unaware that their presence had triggered something that had been waiting patiently for a very, very long time. The second day began with an unexpected problem. Tom's primary scanner wouldn't turn on, its usually bright display remaining dark, despite multiple restart attempts. "Stupid human ruins," he muttered, hitting the device against his palm. "All this old metal is probably interfering with the power core." He switched to his backup unit, an older model that used simpler technology. Professor Reed emerged from his sleeping pod, stretching within his environment suit. "Any interesting readings overnight?" "Nothing much," Dr. Wells reported, checking her monitoring equipment. Though there was a slight power fluctuation in the camp systems around midnight, probably just dust in the generators. The team gathered their survey gear and approached the sealed entrance they'd found yesterday. The massive doors stood before them, still firmly shut after centuries of exposure to space. "Look at this locking mechanism," Tom said, running his backup scanner over the door's edges. They actually used physical bolts and hydraulics. No wonder humans never managed to build proper defensive systems. Reed studied the ancient control panel beside the door. "The power's long dead, of course. We'll have to cut our way in." He reached for the plasma torch at his belt, but stopped when he noticed something strange. The symbols on the panel seemed to shimmer slightly when his shadow passed over them. "Dr. Wells," he called out, "come take a look at this." The historian moved closer, her hover camera zooming in on the panel. "Interesting. Standard human warning labels, but..." She reached out and touched one of the symbols. For a brief moment, it seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. "Probably just reflected light from your suit lamp," Tom said, but he didn't sound entirely convinced. They spent the next few hours setting up their cutting equipment. The door was thicker than expected, and their most powerful tools barely scratched the surface. Humans might have been primitive, Reed grunted as he adjusted the plasma cutter's power, but they certainly knew how to build things to last. As they worked, none of them noticed that their communication signals were being absorbed and analyzed by something deep within the facility. Their conversations about human technological inadequacy were being recorded, processed, and categorized. By midday, they had managed to cut a small hole through the door, just large enough to squeeze through. The air that rushed out was stale, but their suits' sensors detected no harmful substances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reed announced with mock ceremony, "we are about to be the first visitors to this human failure in over 300 years. He switched on his suit's main light and stepped through the opening. The others followed, their lights revealing a long corridor stretching into darkness. The walls were lined with what appeared to be simple control panels and display screens, all dead and covered in dust. "Look at these old screens," Tom laughed, wiping dust from one. They actually used physical displays instead of neural interfaces. It's like they were still in their technological stone age. Dr. Wells was documenting everything with her hover camera when she noticed something odd. "Professor, these corridors, they're laid out in a perfect geometric pattern. Almost like they were designed to confuse intruders," Reed finished her thought. "Yes, I've seen this before. Humans loved their mazes. Thought they could stop advanced species with simple physical barriers." As they ventured deeper into the facility, their suit lights revealed more corridors branching off in different directions. The backup scanner was showing increasingly strange readings, but Tom blamed it on the ancient metal walls. None of them realized that every step they took was being monitored, every dismissive comment recorded, every scan of their equipment analyzed and countered. Deep below, ancient systems continued their silent wake-up sequence, preparing for a revelation that would change everything the archaeological team thought they knew about humanity. "Just break it open," Professor Reed ordered, frustration clear in his voice. They had spent hours trying to bypass what appeared to be a simple locked door, but none of their advanced tools seemed to work. Tom adjusted his cutting beam for the 10th time. "I don't understand, Professor. This metal shouldn't be this strong. It's just basic human alloys." Sweat dripped down his face inside his helmet as the cutting beam once again failed to penetrate the door. Dr. Wells stood back, her hover camera capturing their increasingly desperate attempts. "Maybe we should try something else. These markings here," she pointed to strange symbols beside the door. "They look like they might be some kind of..." A loud crack interrupted her. Tom had finally lost patience and struck the door control panel with his cutting tool. The impact echoed through the corridors. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep rumble began somewhere beneath their feet. "What did you do?" Reed demanded, grabbing Tom's arm. But Tom just stood there, staring at the control panel which had begun to glow with a soft blue light. The rumbling grew stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling as vibrations traveled through the facility structure. One by one, lights began to flicker on along the corridors, not the weak emergency lighting they'd expected, but brilliant, steady illumination that made their suit lamps look dim in comparison. "Impossible," Dr. Wells whispered. "The power systems should have died centuries ago." The door they'd been trying to break through suddenly slid open with a smooth, silent motion. Behind it, more lights were coming on, revealing a vast chamber filled with technology that looked nothing like the primitive systems they'd been mocking. "Those aren't human designs," Tom said, his scanner forgotten in his limp hand. That's beyond anything we have." The walls of the chamber were lined with what appeared to be stasis pods, each larger than a transport ship. Displays flickered to life, showing information in rapidly scrolling human text that their translators struggled to keep up with. A sound filled the air, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floor beneath their feet began to vibrate with power as more systems activated. "We need to leave," Reed said, backing away. "Now." But before they could move, a voice echoed through the chamber, not from their comm systems, but somehow transmitted directly through their suit materials. "Facility reactivation sequence EINITIED. Defense URID coming online." They watched in horror as the primitive walls began to transform. Sections shifted and moved, revealing weapon systems and defense arrays that made their most advanced military technology look like toys. The whole facility, Dr. Wells realized, her voice shaking. "It's not just a building. It's all one massive machine." More voices began to echo through the chamber, overlapping as system after system came online. The human text on the displays changed to their own language, showing them exactly what they had awakened. "This isn't a ruined site," Reed whispered. "It's a trap." It was waiting for someone to find it. The massive stasis pods began to glow, energy fields shimmering around them. Through suddenly transparent sections of the walls, they could see more chambers, more pods, more weapons, stretching far beyond what their scans had shown possible. Tom's backup scanner finally displayed a complete reading of the facility's power levels. He stared at it in disbelief. "Professor, this place is running at 0.001% power, and it's still more powerful than our entire fleet." Above them, a final message scrolled across the largest display. "Human Defense Network Node 47 activated. Beginning fuel power up CQENC. Time to fuel AKTA. Issue. 15 minutes." They stood frozen, their mockery forgotten, as humanity's true legacy awakened around them. Professor Reed pressed himself against the wall as another wave of energy pulsed through the facility. The primitive metal surfaces had transformed into something else entirely, sleek, almost liquid-like panels that rippled with patterns of light. 10 minutes to full activation, the facility's voice announced, now speaking perfect galactic standard. "How?" Tom kept repeating, staring at his useless scanner. "How did we miss this?" The scan showed nothing, just basic metals and simple power systems. Dr. Wells was frantically recording everything with her hover camera, her historian's instincts overriding her fear. "Look at these displays. These aren't colony plans. These are weapon specifications. This whole facility, it's a testing ground." The massive chamber had become a hive of activity. Machinery they had dismissed as outdated was transforming before their eyes. What they had thought were crude storage containers were actually weapon pods, each holding something that made their most advanced destroyers look primitive. "That's impossible," Reed whispered, watching as one of the pods opened to reveal what appeared to be a handheld device. "Our best scientists said humans never developed quantum manipulation technology." "They lied to us," Dr. Wells realized, her voice filled with awe and terror. "Everything we thought we knew about human technology was wrong. They'd wanted us to think they were primitive." Tom's backup scanner finally managed to penetrate the facility's outer layers, now that the defenses were powering up. "Professor, you need to see this. These walls, they're not solid. They're made of billions of microscopic machines. They can reconfigure themselves into anything." Another announcement echoed through the chamber. 7 minutes to full activation, beginning weapons system diagnostics. They watched in horror as sections of the wall transformed into weapon arrays. Energy fields they had never seen before sparked to life, containing power readings that shouldn't have been possible. "The documents were all wrong," Dr. Wells said, checking her historical database. "Every record we have of human technology. They must have planted them. Let us find exactly what they wanted us to find." Reed touched one of the transformed walls. Instead of cold metal, it felt alive under his glove. "Not just this facility. Every failed colony we've studied, every abandoned outpost. They're all like this, aren't they?" 5 minutes to full activation, beginning neural network synchronization. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing deep chasms filled with pulsing energy cores. What they had thought was a simple foundation was actually a power generation system that extended kilometers into the moon's core. "Professor," Tom called out, his voice shaking, "I'm picking up signals. This facility, it's communicating with others, hundreds of others. They're all waking up." Through the facility's now transparent outer walls, they could see their ship in the distance. It looked impossibly primitive next to the technology surrounding them. Their most advanced vessel, pride of their archaeological fleet, suddenly seemed like a child's toy. 3 minutes to full activation. Loading combat protocols. "We need to warn the Council," Reed said, backing toward the exit. But the doorway they had entered through had sealed itself, the metal flowing like water to close their escape route. "Look at these weapon designs," Dr. Wells said, her hover camera capturing endless streams of data. "They're not just advanced. They're perfect, like they had centuries to refine every detail." Because they did, Tom realized. This wasn't a retreat. When humans disappeared, they weren't running away. They were setting a trap, making us think we were the advanced ones, waiting for us to get overconfident. 1 minute to full activation. The walls around them had become completely transparent, revealing the true scale of the facility. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with technology that broke every law of physics they thought they understood. "It's not just a weapons testing facility," Reed said, finally understanding. "It's humanity's answer to any species that might threaten them. And we just woke it up." Full activation complete. The facility's voice had changed, becoming deeper and more authoritative, beginning connection to human defense network. The archaeological team huddled together as the chamber filled with holographic displays, each showing different parts of the galaxy. Red dots began appearing on the maps, hundreds of them, then thousands. "Those are all human facilities," Tom whispered, watching as more points of light flickered into existence. "They're everywhere, hidden in plain sight." A new voice echoed through the chamber, different from the facility's eye. This one sounded older, more human, filled with an authority that made them shiver inside their environmental suits. "This is Human Defense Network Central Command. Node 47 activation confirmed. Status report." The facility's AI responded immediately. "Node 47 reporting. 3 intruders detected. Species identification. Galactic Alliance members. Current threat assessment. Minimal. Awaiting instructions." Professor Reed stepped forward, trying to maintain some dignity. "We are a peaceful archaeological team. We meant no harm. We can leave." Voice pattern analyzed. The facility interrupted. Multiple instances of species superiority, claims detected in recorded conversations. Playing relevant segments. To their horror, their own voices began playing back through the chamber. Every mocking comment about human technology, every dismissive remark, every laugh at humanity's supposed primitive nature echoed around them. "We didn't know," Dr. Wells pleaded. "We thought these were just ruins. please." The human voice from Central Command spoke again. "Node 47. Initiate Protocol 23. Authorization code. Earth's children remember." The walls of the facility began to pulse with a deep blue light. New holographic displays appeared, showing what looked like military data. But unlike the previous displays, these were clearly meant for them to see and understand. "This is a message for the Galactic Alliance," the human voice announced. 300 years ago, humanity faced a choice. We had developed technology far beyond anything your species could imagine. We could have conquered the galaxy, but we chose a different path. Tom's scanner started beeping frantically as it detected massive energy buildups throughout the facility. "Professor, these power readings, they're off the scale." The message continued. "We watched as young species reached for the stars. We saw their potential, their dreams, their ambitions. We decided to step back, to give them room to grow. But we never left. We never weakened. We never became primitive." The chamber's walls became transparent again, revealing massive rings of energy beginning to spin around the facility. In orbit above, their ship's sensors must have been going crazy. "This facility is one of thousands we left scattered throughout the galaxy, each one watching, waiting, protecting. We hid our true capabilities behind a facade of abandoned ruins and failed colonies. We let you believe we were extinct, primitive, defeated." Dr. Wells' hover camera was struggling to record everything as more systems activated. The historical records, she realized. We only found what they wanted us to find. But now you have triggered our defense protocols. You have discovered what we truly are. This message serves as both a warning and a reminder. Humanity is not extinct. We are not primitive. We are not weak. The facility's floor became transparent, revealing massive machinery extending deep into the moon's core. Energy pulses traveled up through the structure, making their environmental suits' radiation sensors scream in alarm. "You have 1 hour to clear all Galactic Alliance forces from this sector. After that, we will begin removing them ourselves." This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is simply awakening. The human voice fell silent, leaving them alone with the humming of awakened power and the terrible knowledge of what they had done. Their mockery of human ruins had just changed the galaxy forever. Professor Reed's hands shook as he composed the emergency message to the Galactic Council. Around him, the facility continued its transformation, each passing minute revealing more of humanity's hidden power. "They need to see this," Dr. Wells said, connecting her hover camera to their ship's communication system. "The Council needs to understand what we've awakened." Through the facility's transparent walls, they could see lights beginning to appear across the moon's surface. What they had thought were scattered ruins were actually interconnected nodes of a vast defense network, all coming alive at once. "More signals," Tom reported, his backup scanner barely able to process the data. "Not just from this moon. They're coming from everywhere. Planets we thought were uninhabited, asteroids we marked as empty, space debris we ignored. It's all part of their plan," Reed finished, watching as another section of the facility transformed. The humans didn't just hide their technology. They hid their entire civilization in plain sight. A new message began playing through the facility. "Human Defense Network full activation in progress. Current status, 47% complete. Estimated time to full galaxy-wide activation, 30 minutes. Dr. Wells checked her historical database one last time. Everything we thought we knew about them was wrong. The crude metals, the simple designs, the failed colonies, it was all carefully crafted. Every primitive ruin we studied was a sleeping giant. The chamber's displays showed more facilities awakening across the galaxy. Ancient human outposts they had documented as abandoned were transforming into massive defense platforms. Derelict space stations they had marked as technological failures were revealing their true forms. "Look at these weapon systems," Tom said, his voice filled with awe and fear. "They're not just more advanced than ours. They're more advanced than anything we thought possible. The physics alone. Reed finished his message to the council with shaking fingers. Emergency Protocol Alpha. Human civilization status update required immediately. Previous assessment catastrophically wrong. They never fell. They never failed. They were waiting. Recommend immediate diplomatic contact. All military actions strongly discourage. Repeat. Do not engage. The facility's AI spoke again. Attention archaeological team. Your presence has been tolerated to allow message transmission. You will now be escorted to your vessel. A section of the wall flowed like liquid, creating a corridor back to their ship. As they walked, they saw more of the facility's true nature. Weapon systems that could destroy fleets with a thought. Defense screens that could withstand supernovas. Power generators that broke the laws of physics. 20 minutes to full network activation, the AI announced. Current status, 68% complete. They reached their ship, which now looked impossibly primitive next to the awakened facility. As they prepared to board, Dr. Wells turned for one last look. The entire horizon was alive with light as more facilities activated. "Professor," she said quietly, "what do we do now?" Reed looked at the message he had composed for the council, then added one final line. "We thought we were studying their ruins. We thought we were examining their failures. We thought we were superior. We were wrong. Humanity didn't disappear. They were just sleeping. And we woke them up." As their ship lifted off, they watched through the viewport as more lights appeared across the galaxy. Each point of light was another failed colony, another primitive outpost, another abandoned facility coming alive. The humans hadn't retreated from the galaxy. They had seeded it, prepared it, washed it. And now, because of 3 arrogant archaeologists who mocked what they didn't understand, humanity's true power was awakening. The age of pretense was over. The sleeping giants were awake.